Ladies and gentlemen, hello again and welcome back to Don't Worry About the Government. My name is Chris Novembrino. On today's episode, we are talking about the documentary Reversing Roe, which was put out in 2018. And joining me to discuss that is Daniel Carpenter. How's it going, Dan?
It's going all right, Chris.
Do you want to give like a little intro to the people to let them know like a little bit about you for those of you who maybe have heard you on the air for the first time here?
I am I'm a groundskeeper at a leisure facility in Sonoma County, California. Uh, uh, Generally, coming at things from a pretty lefty perspective, especially um, especially for this area.
For
But
California?
for California, I mean, Sonoma County is it's big money up here, Chris.
Okay.
There's
All
a
right.
mining
A
industry,
bit. Whoa,
there's
whoa,
a lot
whoa.
of
All right. All right. Big money, Sonoma. Yeah.
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 Um, yeah. I
Okay.
mean,
Fair enough. Yeah. No. I just wanted to give you a little bit of background here. And so what we're talking about today is Roe versus Wade, as I said at the start of the show, and the big reason I wanted to do this episode, because obviously there is other news in the week. I will probably do a rundown of all of the gun violence and what is pending on the legislative side here in another episode at some point this week. But I want to take a look at this topic because there is this very interesting case out of the state of Mississippi, where the state of Mississippi has effectively upheld a 15-week abortion ban, and it has been sitting at the Supreme Court steps waiting to be challenged. And one would think, given the sense of urgency that the conservatives had in getting Amy Coney Barrett onto the court prior to the election, that this would be a slam dunk and one of the first things that conservatives want to do to kind of spike the football in retaliation for losing the election in 2020. Like, they got their court, they want to do it, but it isn't happening. And there is a lot of speculation and a lot of mystery around why cert has not been reached yet for this particular case. But it's obviously a big part of what the conservative court movement has been about for the last 40 years. And I thought it gave us this moment, gives us a great opportunity to kind of take a look back at the Roe versus Wade abortion debate and where it stands in our country. So, Dan, first things first, abortion, Roe versus Wade, pro-choice, pro-life.
abortions for all, Chris. Abortions
Okay.
for all.
All right.
I'm very pro-choice. Yeah, I really have trouble seeing short of like really really fundamentalist values around it. I have a trouble seeing from medically, utilitarianly, I fail to see its negatives.
Yes. Whenever I do one of these episodes, it's like, I want to get different viewpoints. And I for a while would like to get like a pro-life person on the show for these sorts of things. But I got to tell you, at the end of the day, their arguments go back to metaphysics. And it's about a real question of the degree of earnestness from the rhetor on how they feel their metaphysics. There are some people who earnestly believe to the point of tears that abortion should be criminalized because it is murder, and the people who commit abortion should go to jail and they should be legally punished because they believe that it is murder akin to murdering a person walking down the street, shooting a man on Fifth Avenue, that they're one and the same. However, I find that there are a lot of people who make that argument in the same way. We were talking before the show about being like ex-libertarians, right? I'm sure you remember from our libertarian days, the whole taxation is theft argument. And people would make this argument, but you kind of remember the tone to it where they'd make it and they'd act like they'd feel it and they'd bang the table. Oh, yeah. But like at the end of the day, they also didn't really feel it in their bones, and like the banging the table and the frustration, the pathos, and like this is a great injustice is a way of compensating for the fact that like you don't actually really believe taxation is theft, in the same way that you don't believe that like paying for the ham sandwich at the deli is theft. Like, you know, like you I
It's
feel that
also
way about abortion too. I feel like a lot of people say that they view it as murder, but they also don't really feel it in their bones, which is why they compensate for it.
it's also hard to get a lot of those same people to track that level of empathy into literally any other aspect of their life or society, or like
Yes.
anything outside of their specific like family or friends. Like apply it to any kind of greater lens, and it's socialism, or
It's big
it's not for
government
them.
telling me what to do, and you get into the oppositional, defiant disorder sort of thing too.
Sure.
And I will definitely say, COVID-19 has made me really lose patience with the pro-life movement in a way. Like I've never had a lot of patience for the pro-life movement. I've always viewed it as an anti-medical liberty movement, and putting my own priors on the table here before we get into this. My brother had an accident in 1985 wherein he fell in a pool and effectively died, but his body persisted in a vegetative state for 2 decades after that and was in a nursing home. But like in a permanent vegetative state, because of the laws of the state, uh, he just sort of basically had to stay in that holding pattern. There it gets complicated and a little more personal about how like things sort of worked out, but the option was never on the table to allow Michael's body to pass. That was never an option because of the state's intervention in the palette and the range of options available. So medical liberty, and where does the state step in when it comes to familial decisions, has always touched me on like a personal level. I remember watching the Terry Schiavo controversy back in the aughts, and like it just hit in a different way as you have these people coming in, saying they're pro-life, but what they're really in favor of is using the state to cudgel a family into making this choice or that choice for their family. And that is very much where I start this conversation. I want to begin that before we get too, not for you, but also for the listeners too, for those who might not be aware of that. So I've never had like a lot of patience for the pro-life movement, because I feel like they're didactic and they don't really want to help. But COVID-19 and the way the pro-life movement has been all too willing to be, not everyone. There have been some church leaders and stuff who've really, to their credit, have really tried to make a point to be like, hey, go and get the vaccine, because they know that their people are the exact type of people who are the least likely to go and get it. So that, and those people, those ministers, they're great people.
Yeah.
But there are also a lot of derelicts, and a lot of the same derelicts that we see in this movie, or the sons of the derelicts that we see in this movie, like Jerry Falwell Jr.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So that's what brought us to the table here. Oh, also apparently there's another abortion case on the shadow docket, an appeal into Tennessee about a 48-hour waiting period before abortions are performed that could be decided this spring here. So a lot of stuff centering around this. Reversing Roe, put out in 2018. Top line thoughts about the documentary. What'd you think about it?
I liked. I thought it did a nice job of going through in a nice chronology. Um, I always enjoy some nice colorized news footage from back in the day. Um, uh, I mean, I thought it took a fairly like non-inflammatory historical kind of leading up to where we are now. I mean, some of it's speculation. Uh,
The director's very obviously pro-choice.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. But Ava Longoria executive producing. Um,
Also, probably a tell.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I I think it was valuable. I don't know how many people saw it, and if it necessarily I don't know how much difference it's really going to make. Like anybody who would actually watch it is it's like preaching to the converted a little bit. Um, like all the life or death of Roe versus Wade is really like in like a lot of different courtrooms scattered across the country right now. And
Right.
I think a lot of those, like even like I don't even think it's in the hands of a lot of voters anymore. Like I think um the Mitch McConnell's cynicism and the way that he in his and the success of his strategy in stacking these courts across the country has it's I mean it's paying off, and it is going to I mean it could still pay off. Like I think that is where like the battle, like the I think the dice have been cast in a match as much time as he can get through. It's a million moving parts, and we got to see where it's going to end up.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I have my doubts as well about a documentary at this in the way our culture is atomized. Like if this is the 1990s or the 1980s, I believe that a documentary really can move people's needle, and I believe that was even true in the aughts. Like Loose Change, you know, like
For better or for worse.
for better. No, right? No, it might have launched 1,000 QAnons.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I know. But like those documentaries, even like hypernormalization was resonant. I think like there can be those little, but hypernormalization to this point less resonant than Loose Change, even though hypernormalization a much better document than Loose
Yeah.
Change was, in like every possible sense of the word. I don't believe in that.
Is the one his documentaries, they can be very, they're so entertaining. They can really like I'm dropping his name right now.
Adam Curtis, I believe.
Adam Curtis.
Yeah.
They can do they can be really great deep dives on whatever topic he's hyper focused on, but it comes back to a little bit of the intersectionality that I feel is missing from just about like every explanation of anything.
Well,
Like
and in his case, I like he gets it. It's like so he spends a very long time working on these documentaries,
yeah,
and I really feel like they could be broken into several different documents, and like a lot, they're just like oh, like smoshed together, and like it's good, and I see like a meta point in intersecting all of them, but I also go like, dude, bro, like make a mini series,
yeah.
like yeah, like
Give
please,
me 45 minutes every
yes,
like 2 months or something, and
30, 30, 30, 30, 4 episodes. We're done. Yeah,
yeah.
like come on, bro. Edit. It's okay. You can do it. You're not breaking the message here. The brain can handle. But no, I love those series. But I'm with you. I don't think a documentary can move the needle like that. I also agree that one of the tragedies of the abortion debate is that it's been utterly removed from the public. I don't, to your point, I don't know that that would make it better. Because like public opinion is so split on abortion that I don't know that we would vote and legislate in a way that would make it that much more coherent.
I I I agree there. I
Uh,
just like in terms of like
I would prefer
as
that.
we
I would
work
prefer
towards
that.
potential solutions, I don't think that the ballot box is necessarily one in the short term.
No, no, no.
A lot of young judges have to get old and hope, or well, if God willing, retire
Yes.
hopefully at a
Yeah.
young age to pursue something much more lucrative.
Yeah.
But
Spend time with your family that you are focused on.
that is very, very important to you.
It's important that apparently it's important to them that everyone else has one.
Yeah.
So go spend time with yours. Yeah. So I do think this is basically a courts battle, which stinks. But it is what it is. And that's interesting. I also think that the documentary inadvertently, and I didn't catch this the first time around, but when I watched it the second time, it got my like gears spinning. It makes this weird point. I don't think it wanted to, that like a lot of this got set in motion because the court went very big in their ruling the first time. That Roe versus Wade in its ruling was such a big ruling that actually resulted, and they get into that. I don't think they really fully kind of like wind it back and go like, this is a big catalyzing sorting moment that like completely reordered the Republican Party.
they accidentally patrician centralized it, or like they took that view from nowhere that nobody actually has of like these guys, they went too far, like, or what do you, sorry.
Well, yeah, I guess in a way, like, yes, the court inadvertently, they weren't being a squishy patrician center in this case. The court was basically,
Not the court,
uh,
the documentarians, they didn't want their,
I don't think I don't think they wanted to take an opinion on the actual original decision. Other
Mhm.
than like kind of explaining it as a privacy thing, and they even sort of said, well, it was narrow because it didn't weigh in on the metaphysics, which they were kind of like, oh, that's fine, but you could clearly, without really having to think all that hard about it, realize how that'd be absolutely unsatisfactory to anyone who actually believes in the metaphysics. I mean, think about like human rights abuses in Germany, China, wherever. You know, like if you believe they're human rights abuses, the idea that like, well, we're just not considering that today. You know,
Yeah.
um, I think in that sense, yeah, the court, I don't want to say like look, I think they what they came up with is ultimately good policy, but I think if the society's not ready for that, you do get a societal backlash. And I think that that's also an informative lesson right now for the conservatives who would seek to try to wind abortion back in a serious way when culture has gone the other direction, it is going in this other direction. Like there will
Yes.
be a big cultural backlash. Um, I actually like to that point. That is why I think there is so much hand wringing among conservatives right now around woke capitalism.
Hmm.
You see the backlash against the Georgia bill,
Yeah.
MLB moving their All Star game and stuff. That's just the Georgia, the voting rights bill. Some people are calling it racist. I think it's more premised on the big lie than anything. But that's just the backlash to that. Think about what the corporate backlash is, the woke capitalism backlash is going to be to shutting down every abortion clinic in a state.
Sure.
The business exodus and the push among women in org charts in major companies to relocate headquarters, and also the push among many companies to relocate in a
Like
way of
who's gonna move out of West Virginia? Who's gonna move out of Arkansas? Like, I
there are
mean,
blue
like
states.
you'd have to like, do any of the companies that actually like make products there have a mobile enough setup to be able to walk away from it like
Well,
that?
I mean, it's happening in Georgia. Like,
But like
Georgia.
you can move movie studios, you can play baseball games in other stadiums. You can't like move your slaughterhouse.
No, no, no,
You
no.
can't move your resource extraction.
I'm not talking about those are local businesses though. I'm talking about corporates like the Fortune 500s, the ones that are
Sure.
the national companies that can relocate to anywhere. So instead of maybe going to Texas now, like in the
Mhm.
other place where this hurts too is in future relocations. So to your point, yes, rehoming a little difficult. However, when it comes time for BIPCO, let's say, to consider where BIPCO is going to relocate their company to, maybe BIPCO was thinking about Texas because of the low state income tax, but now there are no abortion clinics in Texas, and Greg Abbott's making himself a national poster boy along with Dan Patrick and our crazy attorney general here. And BIPCO doesn't want to go there.
Sure.
And maybe a blue state capitalized on that. I mean, like, look, you got Delaware's. It's not like every blue state has. It's not like every blue state's anti-business.
Oh yeah, I grew up in New Jersey, Chris,
Mhm.
and live in California.
Right. So there are enterprising, slightly corrupt blue states that would love to have that, and conversely, too, there are red states that are really dependent, because they have slashed their tax rates so much in the state. They're dependent on a certain volume of capital moving through the state freely, and so like, look, Georgia's putting a big face on this right now, but if MLB and NBA and all the if all that stuff goes out of Georgia and Georgia's like, yeah, no, Kemp's gonna want that stuff back, and also it will be a huge asset for Democrats, again for good and for ill here, to be able to go, I can bring the companies back, baby. Um,
Yeah,
not maybe necessarily ideal
not going
for
to give
our.
me my favorite Democratic politicians to bring
It's
those
not going to give
corporates
you the
back.
warm and squishies, but it is also a thing that I can definitely see happening.
Yeah.
But that's why I think they're so worried about the woke capitalism thing right now. Is that they realize that if the backlash is this bad, and we saw this with Chick-fil-A, didn't really hurt Chick-fil-A's business. And it's
It's much
sometimes. Well, go
it's
ahead.
much more profitable to raise money off threatening to do it than to actually do the thing.
Yes. And also, yeah, the net result too is sometimes this does bite you in the ass. Like, I don't know how good My Pillow was doing as a business, but like, they're in trouble. I'll give you a better one though. Full Tone. Ever since this is a piece of pedals, dude.
Mhm,
I don't know if you heard about this. Mike Fuller owns Full Tone pedals. We did a seg on this about the OCD overdrive pedal.
mhm.
Was a popular pedal. Fuller decided to get on his Facebook page and talk about why Black Lives Matter is the worst thing in the world. And how they're ruining society and stuff like that. And like that hurt his business. People don't use this stuff anymore. So like, yeah, that's the one problem for them in the culture wars that up till now the corporations were on their side, and in the last 3 to 5 years, it's kind of switched on them, and I think they are worried about that. I was struck by how much of a class disparity there was when abortion was illegal in this country. Pre-Roe, an abortion, I don't know if you caught this, cost $700 in 1965 money. Let's get out the old Google inflation calculator. How much do you think that's worth, Dan?
Thinking that's about 4 grand, Chris.
All right, $700 in 1965 money. So is worth today. It would be worth $5,886 right now. So think about in America the type of person who could pony up quickly in Mississippi in under 15 weeks, $5,886 to get
Yeah.
access to an abortion. And that's the way abortion was back in the 60s. And that was for the illegal backroom abortions, of which there were over 1 million a year at that point. Any thoughts?
I mean, it's startling. I mean, and both of us are white men, and so haven't really had to have never had to particularly confront this, but it's the cost of it, particularly. I mean, it's like any illegal, making anything illegal just raises the prices of it. It's a economic factor that comes in for the argument of like legalizing drugs and like declassifying substances. But it like the anything that people are going to do, if you make it illegal, you're not actually stopping it, you're just making it expensive.
Yes, yeah, yeah. And then
Which gives
it's
it
illegal
gives
for the poor.
yeah, it's abortions for all who want it, or it's access for all who want it.
No, it's
A
abortions
little
for
bit.
all who can afford it.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, and in this case, yeah, in the mid '60s, not many could. Putting that into a more modern context, about 15 years ago or whatever, an abortion was about $500 to $700. So that it's a big paradigmatic difference. And who can afford that is, of course, very different. Roe, as we mentioned, didn't focus on fetal persondom. And essentially, the Warren Court kind of was willing to accept, oh, that's a matter of metaphysics and that's a matter left between church and state. Following that, though, we get a big realignment. So part of that happens on the left. So, for example, Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood originally had a broad range of people on the left and the right, including in the religious community, who were in favor of contraceptive services. And what I thought was interesting, too, is I mean, like the way they talk about contraceptive in the 60s, not even remotely related to pregnancy like that. Like they don't think of it as like anti-abortive thing. It was just
Well,
like,
I mean, Planned Parenthood just this year, I think just recently renounced Phyllis Schlafly, their founder,
right.
for all of her racist statements. A lot of like
She was a
bordering on
eugenicsy.
eugenics.
Yeah, yeah. She was
Yeah.
kind of eugenicsy. Yeah, yeah. Well, in fairness, though, While the right likes to point that out, you see multiple times throughout the documentary, the pro-life people were also happy to talk about scolding black people into having more kids. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I think you're betraying your race. Like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, you're a hero, bro. Mm. So yeah, no. Look, the past.
As a Polish person talking to an Italian person, I don't think Teddy, like, there was a time where progressives didn't consider any of us as American enough. So
I'm always quick to point out to people that Sacco and Vanzetti was less than 100 years ago,
yeah.
and it's not lost on me. Yeah, like it was not that long ago where you couldn't have an O in your last name and be doing like news broadcasting and stuff. Not like they'd have you change your name to like Johnson or Jones. I would be like, I would have some Novson or something like that would be my name back in the day.
I'm glad that glad that a patriarchal great grandfather opted out of I, I'm that I'm not Poniatowski. I'm Carpenter instead of Poniatowski. It was a lot easier to spell when I was 5 years old.
Yeah, sure. No, I will tell you, as a young man who was not great with handwriting, I did not love my last name for many years because it took a while with the writing. The writing was hard. All right. So on the left we have Planned Parenthood. They get on board with, okay, we're in favor of abortions. As I sort of summarize relatively quickly, I would have loved some more expansion on this. There was turnover in the chapters, right? Like that would have been a
Yeah.
nice, yeah.
The yeah, yes. There was some that was I that was one of my a note that I made to myself was the glossing over of the early life of Planned Parenthood.
And yeah, no, like the transition's a really interesting time, and I don't think it does the movement a disservice to see like the internal tension of like Planned Parenthood realigning into the modern organization. I really don't. If anything, what does harm is giving people this like noble image of it, only to have that noble image shattered. Yeah.
What? Hey, did you hear about the real origin of Planned Parenthood?
Did you know
Like,
they're into eugenics? Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, right. Yeah, like, did you know that like when you go into Planned Parenthood now in 2020, you're really just eugenicizing
just
the yeah, right, yeah. No, it's
like
stupid.
if you've got that back there, like you got to own it. Like that's they finally like it's good that this year they finally addressed the Phyllis Schlafly of it all. But it's like if you try and for a long time, I think the McKinsey corporate wisdom was you don't talk about it. Like if it's you only do the positive stuff, you just barrel through.
I mean, my broad criticism, and I always feel weird. Again, as you said, two white dudes. We're dudes. We're like so, like we're allies, but we're not stakeholders, and that does matter. But my one criticism of a lot of the pro-choice movement is that, like, for example, pro-choice. I'm in favor of that phrase, but like, we really need to be calling it medical liberty because, like, at the core of it, and one thing that the pro-life movement does really well is one branding pro-life. Like I mean, they're talking about the fetus as though it's already alive. And they start with that, but like we get into the example of partial birth abortions later on. Like they like make a phrase up out of thin air to describe an event that happens wildly infrequently. I remember when we did the Virginia episode. Remember Virginia did the partial birth abortions ban a couple of years ago. The I forget the percent of things that actually fell under the partial birth abortion thing was like way under 1%. But they do
Sure.
a really nice job paying that image.
How do you think Johnson and Johnson feels this week?
Not great. Yeah. I mean, boy, that gets me though, because it's like the same people who are like, well, now I don't have to get the vaccine. You see, there's a risk.
Yeah,
These are the same people who are like boldly saying,
you drive a car every day. Like, what are you talking about?
and you've been telling everyone, don't worry about COVID, and even if you get it, it's no big deal because the risk of you actually going to the hospital is so low. I'm like, so if you're not worried about risk, what are you worried about?
Sure.
Yeah, I think you're worried about risk all of a sudden. So on the right here, we have this realignment where you get people like Randall Terry, Jerry Falwell, Paul Weyrich. Terry Randall Terry creates the social crusade element of it. Pat Robertson starts the 700 Club TV show, which becomes wildly popular. The 1980s, they don't really talk about this, but you have like a big rise of evangelicalism and televangelists,
Sure.
televised evangelicals. So you have the social crusade level. Then you have Wayrick showing up, making it political and being kind of
Well,
very into that. And then
in,
you have,
eh,
oh, go ahead.
on the part of why all of these evangelicals showed up is, and it's part of the intersection is, it's the Cold War of it all, the fact that nuclear bombs could drop from the sky and everybody's life could be over. So everybody's like, you have people trying to get right with God, you have people who are like going off, and like you have the the postmodernist of like, hey, it's all relative, man.
Oh god, and on the other side,
You
you
just
have
have
like the
like this
Yogi,
massive,
yeah, and the Jane
you have
Fonda types, yeah.
a massive like expansion of the social mores because it could all be over tomorrow. And I don't think, because it didn't happen, I don't think a lot of people, particularly who lived through that time, like think about it that way or like consciously perceive it that way. But like there's the risk that like their risk taking factor was, or things were in turmoil.
Right. Well,
Let's
no,
say.
I mean, you could kind of think, like, if you take a step back and go, okay, pretend now that I am a fairly religious dude living in 1975, and there are nuclear weapons that are scary, that are new to the world, that have been developed during my lifetime.
You're
Russia
just
seems,
finding out about MK Ultra. You're
yep,
like Vietnam is, the
Vietnam's not going
boondoggle is
well.
just wrapping up,
And
or
it
still
didn't go
going.
well. It's not clear who's winning in this Cold War between the United States and Russia. Meanwhile, we keep building up nuclear weapons left and right. At any point, nuclear error could occur. And this is on the minds of everyone from The Clash to The Police to, movies written about it. 1984, Red Dawn. I mean, like, people are thinking about this nuclear incident setting off World War III at any time. And if you're a Christian person, that sounds an awful lot like end times.
Mhm.
It sounds like the chapter before the chapter of end times starting. And you can sort of understand.
Especially if you're really struggling to write that sermon on Sunday,
Yeah.
or sermon for Sunday.
Or struggling to keep people's asses in the bench.
Yeah.
You want to make sure they're staying in the pews. So yeah, no, all of a sudden the Supreme Court case comes down. It's super clarifying for a brand build. Okay, we have a thing here. And what starts to get set up is what I was thinking about as I was watching this documentary, which is totally different from where I started. This is my novel thought of the week, is how like proto QAnon this is. You have the social thing, the series of gateways. It starts off as a kind of churchy thing, a social thing. Jerry Falwell says we got to get him saved, we got to get him baptized, and then we got to get him registered to vote. Sort of gives you
Mhm.
the concept, the thing. So you have Terry up here. Falwell is kind of gatewaying you from, okay, now you're aware, now you're unwoke, if you will. Now I'm gonna get you saved, we're gonna get you voted. Now I'm handing you off to my buddy Paul Wayrick, who also not included in this documentary, also is one of these guys who's like, we like don't want people to vote, we want fewer people to vote. He's that guy who said that. Like, he's a real kind of organizer of all this stuff. And it creates this gateway, and you got Pat Robertson on the TV. He can rev people up, and to that gateway QAnon Pizzagate sort of thing. That's how you end up going and shooting abortion doctors in real life. The stairway, if you will, is very QAnon but pre-digital.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Um,
I mean, also, I mean, Jerry Falwell had the 700 Club. There weren't that many. Now we have hundreds of television channels. Like, I'm sure there were large swaths of the country where he was one of 10 things on.
yeah,
Like
and
one of 10,
evangelicals were
like,
relentless. They were
yeah,
relentless about buying TV time on the shittiest network because it didn't matter. They literally just needed your slot. Ideally on a
they
low
weren't
channel.
they
Yeah,
weren't paying taxes on the money to do it either.
right. Right, yeah,
or for
sometimes
yeah,
caught up to Jim and Tammy Faye Baker, yeah, but sometimes. Um, so that, as Paul Weyrick says, we found our issue. This becomes organizing, and it leads to a realignment of the Republican Party throughout the mid 70s all the way into the 90s. I was actually struck a little bit with like George H.W. Bush, in no small part because of Barbara, very much a holdout on this. He was a pro-choice Republican,
yeah.
um, and they did not like that. That was not a
I
popular
mean,
thing.
he was like a Massachusetts money guy, like like he the brushing shoulders with like a lot of very worldly bankers. Like I'm sure, like in spite of what he thought needed to be done countrywide, I'm sure he had personal opinions on like what he thought best for his
I,
family or like
I
what
also think like him and Barbara had a fairly like for wasps. I feel like their marriage was fairly egalitarian. Like what Barbara said had a lot. I feel like Barbara basically was like near even money with George in terms of like setting the tone in their household.
Mhm.
Yeah, she never struck me as a weak woman. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then we kind of build into the 1980s. The pro-life people get their guy on Ronald Reagan, and getting Reagan to really convert from being a guy who signed a pro-choice bill in the 1960s to being a pro-life dude was a big feather in their cap, and they felt great about that. Also along the way here,
He was a union president at one point. Like didn't do awesome with it, but
yeah,
he went from a rather progressive place to a little bit off the rails.
yes, and it's not like it always felt like a bit of a work too. Did Reagan really believe it? You know, it like because like at the same time his wife's all into the astrology and all the other, the so like I don't know. I think Reagan was working a lot of different angles at the same time. He's a complicated dude. Um, but they get Reagan. That's a big feather in their cap. At the same time, they eventually, this is not covered in the documentary, but they get Norma, who is Jane Roe. Norma, I forget her last name. They get into a relationship with her where she goes, "Oh, I recant all of my, I recant what I did. Roe versus Wade was a horrible mistake. This shouldn't have happened." What is
I
it?
think the same thing happened with one of the, I believe one of the doctors who was performing the surgeries. They flipped one of the doctors became like who pioneered the procedure ended up flipping. I think that's the plot of this like I think it's the Mike Lindell produced Roe versus Wade that just came out recently. I thought when you wanted to do this, I thought it was in response to that. Like you didn't want to give that any oxygen, but you still wanted to cover the topic.
No, I hadn't even thought about it like that. That's You're giving me
But
way too much
he's got
credit.
like
I
they
wish
have a
I
they
wish I wish I was the Chris that you're talking about. He sounds really smart. That guy's got something. I'm into
but,
him.
but I mean they're doing the Gramsci thing. They're rewriting history in this produced film that is going to go out. I'm sure all of its views are going to be subsidized in every like church and religious school, any venue that they can find that isn't like that'll bring as many maskless people as they can manage. The like it's gonna get out there, and it's their like rewritten, or they're very rosy colored to their perspective view of the history of this.
Yes. Well, look, once
And
this,
that's
this
the
is the
main.
LARP component of it. This is the LARP. Yeah, yeah. I mean, once you adopt the we're on a crusade thing, I know the crusade thing feels like, Christian onward Christian soldiers, but like think about the people who were saying this in the 70s. Like, look at them, watch the videos. These are nerds. These are
Yeah.
nerds on a LARP. They're Christian nerds. They're not like Dungeons and Dragons, but like they're nerds. These are not real fighters. They're not the warrior class. These are not people animated with like deep core. I just need to fight. Like no, they're fake
I think
philosophers and
I
such.
think the recurring shots of them crawling at the U.S. Marshals' feet during the sequence when they were showing a lot of the turmoil when there was a lot of assassinations of abortion doctors. They had a clip of what I forget which organ. It was one of the organizations that was like a hyper dorkier version of the Proud Boys, and it showed them like crawling, like they were trying to be babies crawling at the feet of whatever police officers were guarding these clinics.
It's yeah, it's as I say again, I can't help but feel like this is just a half-felt argument, and I'd have so much more respect for
But
the
how are they
pro
winning, Chris? How are they winning?
because it's a good grift. Because it's a good business. I heard it described as inertial force. I think that's part of it. But like, look, what would Pat Robertson do but sell this crusade?
It's going to
What?
crash the economies of like Florida and Kansas, like all the like any of these televangelists. Like I mean, I'm sure they're going to start going after trans folks or like something
Yeah,
else.
yeah, yeah.
But the I think back to the point of like I don't think they could ever actually go through with it because it's just going to hurt the pocketbook too much.
Oh no, I think there will be one state that does it because here's the thing. Going back to the inertial forces, the state legislatures tend to be a lot more partisan. A lot more. They're a lot more like true believers at the state. Like look at Arizona. Arizona's state legislature is staffed with some like nuttos. And Arizona, meanwhile, is going the other way. But I could totally see, because of that dynamic, the state legislature going, we're going to really go after abortion. And that just creating a shitstorm in Arizona, just like an absolute shitstorm in Arizona. You could see like, Idaho and some of these other states doing that too and just completely, ruining their economy. Maybe a Kansas. A number of these different states. But I think one or two or maybe a few of these states walk the plank, realize what happens when you walk the plank, and like a number of these companies pull out, and the other states kind of go, ooh, yeah, all right.
Has there been a state that I feel like in like 2012 it was like or like the late during the Obama era, it was like Ohio and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania a little bit that were like creeping in that direction where you
Yeah.
could see like that, like a state legislator getting emboldened to go after that kind of thing. I'm trying to think about what areas are creeping in that way. That aren't like hyper red enough to do it, like to have been able to do it already. I guess somewhere in the South, maybe like a Carolina.
You could see Florida doing it. And
Florida
that would
potentially.
put DeSantis in potentially a kind of a tough situation here, because DeSantis is I don't know how I do, because the Democrats aren't very good at this. But like DeSantis is trying to sanitize his image, and make him seem like not the Trump dude that he most certainly ran on and basically has been his entire career. And an abortion bill would put him in a really tough situation because he would want to sign it into law. But once he did that, the jig would effectively be up that he's anything different.
I mean, Trump was so vulgar and so clearly not. I mean, he's not evangelical enough that I could like. I mean, he would have to take like an even more rightward route around Trump, and that like he would have to just become a crazy religious creep to really go that far. Like I don't.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. And to that point, actually, I was thinking about it, I was just watching the documentary,
Fl-
how
I don't think Florida couldn't do it with just the amount of Disney that is located there. Like Disney wouldn't let them go anywhere near that.
no, I mean this is this is a problem for a guy like DeSantis though. I think when abortion gets sent back to the states, the immediate impulse will be you're not a real conservative if you're not trying to outlaw abortion in the states. Now that we did all this work for the last 50 years to get it outlawed in the states, like effectively you will be a rhino if you're not actually trying to finish the job. Now that we got it back to your state.
I think it'll just turn into a nice grift of like, oh no, I
Yeah.
can't do it. I'm raising like it'll be much more profitable for them to just raise money to throw in fake fists at it.
Yeah. No,
Like, oh, all these terrible Democrats won't let us do it. You got to give us more money. Oh no.
I tend to agree. I I think that it's good business for them more than it is good politics for them. And yeah, no, kicking it back will be a mistake. Um, so there were some setbacks along the way here. I think that they could have gotten a quick win in the 80s, but Sandra Day O'Connor essentially said no. And I had kind of forgotten Sandra Day O'Connor was really presented as like the Amy Coney Barrett before there was an Amy Coney Barrett. And somewhere along the way, Sandra Day O'Connor did not want to do that job. Which I didn't. They could have spent some more time on that. I thought.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Is that deep of a river, or is that like? I mean, has the Supreme Court has done like
I mean, she
since
did
then
say
has
during
been
her
pretty like
confirmation hearing
pro
she's.
corporate, pretty pro like.
I'm
I
just
don't know. I
saying,
think
like her.
she did say it. Yeah, she said in her
She said like
confirmation
sort of
hearings
like
that she
yeah,
would.
absolutely yeah. It was absolutely anti-abortion.
But I think they to be the one divided like the one vote like she wouldn't want to be the decider. Like she
I
would
don't think
love
Amy Coney
to have
Barrett
gone
has that
7-2.
problem. Is what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
no,
Yeah, no.
yeah,
Yo,
absolutely.
I think Amy Coney Barrett's like, I get to go down in the history books. It's like, yeah, so did Pol Pot. Not everyone who goes in the history books goes in for the good reasons, Amy.
Yeah.
Uh, and then we get Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which at the time, I think many in the pro medical liberty movement viewed as kind of a win because they stopped the court from outlawing abortion, and it seemed possible given the current makeup of the court, the kind of decline of the Warren court, start of the Rehnquist court. However, what Casey did was introduce an undue burden standard and allowed states to start regulating to death a lot of abortion clinics across the country. So they have things called trap laws, which are targeted restrictions on abortion providers, which is essentially using the state and regulation from the state as a way of crushing a business. The way conservatives, of course, are in favor of doing in every other set. Yeah, right. Like that's the other thing that kills me is that as they're bemoaning the woke capitalism, oh, we're going to have to use the state to crush businesses. It's like, is that very conservative? Yeah, hmm. But they've been doing it with great effect on Planned Parenthood for many years here. This is also how they got to the point where they could make a woman have to undergo the medical procedure of doing an ultrasound and staring at the ultrasound and having the ultrasound explained to them. And
It's
it all.
also
Oh, go ahead.
Planned Parenthood has become the only target just because they were the only one, like they were the only national organization with like deep enough pocketbooks and good enough like enough lawyers to not just immediately have to fold underneath the pressure of any state prosecutor or legislature coming down on them.
Right, yeah, because in a lot of these other places, you can court case them death, and they basically can't afford to handle the court cases, which effectively criminalizes them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or they were the municipalities used like rezoning stuff, and so like a Planned Parenthood it will be able to move across town, but an independent clinic is not going to be able to sustain that kind of thing.
Or you have to do updates. It's like, I mean, kind of like, when COVID-19 happened, a lot of businesses had to put up glass and stuff. A lot of that, some of that was expensive, some of it wasn't. But like, imagine that in a much more malicious way, targeted at one specific business. And that's what a lot of these trap laws are centered around. And Planned Parenthood versus Casey sort of viewed it as a setback at the time, ended up being a real blessing for the anti-medical liberty movement because it allowed them to slow down and just start attacking this from every single side they possibly could, which is kind of what they've done since then. Clinton puts RBG on the court. Boy, RBG's appearance in this movie and her presentation in this movie, there's a part where and she felt like it was really necessary to read her like the dissent, and she wanted to read it in, and how urgent it was, and it's like, you not stepping down when you need to step down is going to be a major part of this story. However the history plays out, what RBG did in the way that she handled the back end of her career was a major setback for the medical liberty movement. And it didn't undo all the good work she did while on the court, but it certainly did some of it. It certainly moved things in the wrong direction. Thoughts on RBG?
The I'm really hoping that the we don't end up in the same position. Right now, there's been talk about
Breyer.
pressuring,
and the idea that it's like
Breyer
untoward. The commentary on, is it too mean to ask Breyer to step down? The dude's 82. I'm done. I'm done playing nicey nice with
like
people over the age of 80.
I don't understand, like, if people have like a fruit fly's memory on a lot of these things. Like, it's not it's not just going, like, it's not coming back around. Like, what was the major crisis of, like, actually there's been so many major crises of the last several years, but like it was a big issue. I don't know how it doesn't stick in people's minds. Like,
yes. I mean, the one big positive, the only positive I can say about RBG and the way she handled things is it made salient in the minds of blue voters. I'm just going to kind of encompass anyone who, if they were going to vote gun to their head, would vote for the Democrat because voting for the Republican seems very contra to their persona, broadly speaking. The one thing that I think is positive about RBG and the way that she mishandled things is it clarified for a lot of blue voters that it is important to focus on the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court is like an actual portal and a vehicle for change. You would have hoped that the positivistic lesson of gay marriage in the previous decade would have served as maybe a positive way of hitting that home of like, hey, good stuff can happen on the Supreme Court if you've got it balanced out the way you want. This could be a place where good stuff happens. But kind of conversely, if that can't serve as the positive example, hopefully, at least now, and it does seem to be the case in polling, liberals, Democrats, progressives, lefties, whatever, get that the Supreme Court, if it's not with you, it's against you. And that's a big problem, at least for us right now. My other thought that I wanted to get at here too, is the abortion debate in its size in the Republican psyche. So one thing I think the documentary does a nice job sort of summarizing is how the abortion debate realigns the Republican Party. But I also think that this helps to really explain why they were able to swallow so much of the bullshit from Donald Trump in the last several years here. And at the end, there's that point where the one pro-life guy's like, you can hear in that one debate where Trump's talking about abortion to Hillary, and he's like, they're killing babies and they're ripping them from the womb. And that's authentically Trump. That's not something that he was just coached up on. No, it's funny because he's saying that, but it's actually literally the opposite. It's the thing that they got him to say, that like they got him to say it with conviction, and he didn't sandbag it like he would with like, get your vaccine, I guess. Like that was Trump committing to the thing that he actually doesn't believe in at all. They're ripping him from the womb. It's awful. It's disgusting. It's vile. How could anyone do such a thing? Oh, my mistress is pregnant. Yeah, right. No, they're putting that as a feather in the cap and going like, look, we got Trump to say the magic words. And he did the performance and he sang the song. He sang our song. He sang it. You can't get this guy to say anything. We got him to say stuff. Win. And that's why evangelicals were willing to stick with this guy. And that's why they made the trade-off. And that's why they made the transaction. And like, it's always like, why wouldn't evangelicals stop supporting this guy? Because that was the deal. And Trump, for his part, in a lot of ways, lived up to the bargain. Insofar as the bargain doesn't get held up at this point, it'll be because the Supreme Court fails them, and that won't even be held against Trump, because Trump, as we all know, was just greenlighting whoever they put in front of him. So if the Federalist Society dropped the ball here, even that doesn't get laid at the doorstep of Trump. Trump did what they wanted them, or what he wanted them, or what they wanted. But it really does speak to the size and his influence in the movement, that just that was enough to forgive away the big spending, the uncouthness, the fact that the guy clearly is not a Christian. He holds the Bible upside down.
Yeah.
Like I literally upside down. Like the guy is 2 Corinthians.
Yeah.
I mean, any number of things. But he said the magic words.
That's all it takes.
It's all it takes. No, it really does speak to the power that movement has.
There's a little bit. It's also a little bit that mythology is possible within the evangelical Christian mindset because of the Redeemer, the redemption aspect that is intrinsic to so many people who are 100% in for Trump are really hoping that whole they're really hoping the redeeming
King Cyrus narrative
aspect of
the King Cyrus narrative.
Yes.
For those of you who aren't familiar with this, Cyrus, a character from the Bible, is a pagan king, but God works through him. And so essentially the teaching here for Christians is sometimes you get a shitbag who does not appear in any way, shape, or form to be a moral man, but disregard all of the things your lying eyes present to you, because God is in fact moving through the shitbag.
And by moving through that shitbag, he has become renew, and he's going to get that ticket to heaven that everybody's just really hoping for.
Yeah,
whatever you did up to that point, scrubbed off.
I forget how the Cyrus thing. I don't even know that they go that far with Cyrus in the Old Testament. I literally just think that the message is that sometimes God works through people who are not part of God. What you're thinking of is like King David. David, I think, is the one where like he was a pagan and God moves through him, and then like that changes David. But point being, yes, the Lord works in mysterious ways. A common theme throughout the Bible, and yeah, definitely extended into Trump. But yeah, it's pretty wild as you take a step back to think about like how powerful the abortion movement is, and also, as I was saying earlier, like it's weird QAnon sin the internet like vibe that it has. How like it gateways people. You start as a dude who just goes to church, like that guy who ended up shooting George Tiller.
Just watched too much 700 Club.
You're right. I watched too much 700 Club. What does that sound like 20 years ago? It sounds like I spent too much fucking time on 4chan.
Yeah.
Right. I was lonely. He was like, I was alone. I was lonely. I got radicalized by. It sounds a lot like Al Qaeda too. Oh, by the way, QAnon, Al Qaeda, these things.
Lost people in our
lost people getting found on the internet. I mean, here's an interesting place to kind of wrap it up. I was thinking about 9/11 the other day and the global war on terror the other day. A fun topic. I'm a fun guy, Dan, is what I'm trying to tell you. I have fun thoughts. I'm always thinking fun things. And what I was thinking about is how after 9/11, of course, the big takeaway was Islamic extremism is bad. We got to fight them there. So we're not fighting them over here, which, like, as we get further and further out, seems absolutely asinine if you really think about it. But what I was really thinking about is how we utterly removed from the narrative to me the most important part, which was the online radicalization component of it. That these are disenfranchised men who had fallen out of society, are forgotten men, shall we say, and they get found by an online group who gives them identity, purpose, and sometimes religion or a quasi religious experience. And then bad fucking things happen.
Yep.
A time honored tradition. The religion is really secondary to the structure. And like to this point, Al Qaeda was a LARP. A lot of those guys did not really believe that they were bringing on an Islamic State. They believed that using Islam and radicalized Islam is a fun way of getting people who really are religious zealots to do stuff. But a lot
It's
of those
it's
leaders, guys, were not like real true believers.
it's there's similar echoes to it in the militia white supremacy movement. It's just these guys in economically depressed rural areas, just they aren't lonely anymore. Like they have friends, they have purpose, they have plans, they know what they're going to do that isn't sitting on their couch like with their mom. Like
Yeah.
it's a lack of
Where we
purpose and a
go
lack
one,
of
we go
direction.
all. You're
Yeah.
not alone. That's like the whole point of that catchphrase. Yeah. I was watching the QAnon documentary, so I was thinking about all the big catchphrases they have, and you can sort of reverse engineer them and think about the feeling that's really trying to wash over you. And yeah, that's the big thing with all these online groups is you're not alone anymore. You're part of something bigger. I know you
Mhm.
feel alone sitting in your apartment just on this message board, but you're not. We're all with you, man. We're there. Hey, it's good to see you.
And
I like.
that is so intoxicating, so dangerous, so like um it's terrifying.
No, it really it's
Like
one
I've
of the.
I've been like I was like a depressed kid in a rural area. Uh the like I understand the mindset. I just had like I had good friends and resources, and I ended up being able to move to New York City. I got a better job. I got out of my like the little town that I lived in. Like, but I know I'm
That's
one of
not.
the
It's hard for
10%
some
that gets
people.
the
Yeah,
momentum to do it. And
right.
there's so many people that get left that I'm sure didn't have the resources and the ability to make that happen.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's hard and like yeah, like look, like the inertia of life can be very hard. A lot of forces keep us anchored into one place, and sometimes you're
That
just not. You're not in the right place. You're not in the right place for you.
money money can be like gravity in that if you
Yeah,
don't have enough of it, you can't keep it together. And once you've got enough of it, it just keeps coming. But
yeah.
it can be without enough of it, you can't keep any of it, like you can't make any of it stick together, like matter in the universe.
Yeah, no, no, for sure. So it's just it's like it's interesting because I do think a lot about all of these movements really do prey upon, and the abortion one really like they love men who are lost. I in watching the other thing, the thing with Jane Roe, her deathbed confession or whatever, where she was like talking about that there's a minister who is also paying her off, who kind of validated her role, sort of like, oh yeah, no, we were definitely paying her, and we were just trying to. He was like, I was always wondering if she was playing us because we were playing her, and he was like, oh, she was playing like it was like we're you. It's good. I recommend going and watching that one too, for those who want more on this topic. Um, but yeah, I can't help but think about the economic component of this. Like abortion is really it's a poor person's fight because for a rich person, this is always it's gonna be a matter of like aggrievement. Oh, I
You
felt
can
like
fly to Sweden.
I felt
Like
like a criminal having to go into that back office. At least you were able to get into that back office.
Yeah.
versus I have no access to this. I'm using a coat hanger and I'm a bloody mess and I'm dead now.
Yeah.
Or I'm in the hot that the image of the woman with the part of the coat hanger in her, like, I mean, horrible stuff. Horrible
Yeah.
stuff. Any final thoughts on this topic before we call it a show?
I the documentary, particularly Reversing Roe, um, it really showed, like, it showed a little bit of the movement and the way that it's a reflection of the American conservative movement. And you saw like Nelson Rockefeller using, like, in the Republican household that I grew up in, like like being conservative was all about like personal responsibility. Everything centered around like responsibility. We don't want entitlements because those people should just be responsible for themselves. It's all around responsibility. And you saw a lot of that attitude around like the medical liberty was like people should have the initial Republican reaction prior to the rise of the religious right was around people should have liberty because they have responsibility. Like it was indifference to the poor, which is pretty standard for that mindset, but it was permissive to
It was like
like
class
permissive
indifferent.
to,
Yeah, it was class indifferent, generally speaking. Yeah.
yeah, it was permissive to the point that you could afford to do it,
Right.
essentially.
Right.
um and just that the there I think there are still a lot of conservatives that think they still like that think that the personal responsibility thing still underwrites all of their decision making, and the to the degree that it is not is like the degree that Roe versus Wade is more imperiled every day or more imperiled increasingly every decade, what have you.
Yeah. Um.
The debate and the right mindset very, in my opinion personally, like parallels the descent into madness of the right wing or of the conservative party in America.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Right. I think it's just I understand why people look at the 1960s Republican Party as just a very different entity. And increasingly, when you just get like, look, yes, were they, patrician-y? Sure. Like, they're the party of the business, but they also just had like the ideology, to your point, it has more moments of like class indifference. There's just, it is more liberty in like a broad egalitarian application of liberty. And
It's liberal in the classical
yeah,
liberal sense.
yes. And whereas modern republicanism really does just sort of like grab at different arguments as, like, I mean, like, look at them right now with like Section 230 and going after woke. All of a sudden, they're Teddy Roosevelt trust busters. Fuck the free market. Yeah, now that the free market's against us, let us crush it because,
Yeah,
yeah.
Mitch McConnell's statement trying to thread the hey, businesses don't get involved in politics except for the donations, but like,
It's hard to take it seriously, like
yeah,
for all of the flaws of the Democratic Party, for their hypocrisies around Cuomo, any number of other issues. There is not like the sustaining level of incoherence that I feel with the Republicans, where it really is just moving from argument to argument freely at this point.
I think we need a specific person or a specific person assigned from each media organization just when stuff like that happens in a press gaggle to just go, oh, come the on.
I know.
Just really like not let it just stand in that very like preserving access kind of way, like a sacrificial reporter. You send a new one each week, just like
I need you gotta be shitting me. Come on. Yeah. No, right. Like the come on guy, I do think needs to be there a little bit more. No, and yes, to that point, I think part of the problem too is a lack of incredulity from the press, broadly speaking here, as the Republican position is simply just, it is not serious. And it's less serious than it was even 20 years ago. 20 years ago, neoconservatism, a bad ideology, yes. And I could say many other things. Say what you will about neoconservatism. It is a bad ideology. It's a much more coherent and fleshed out ideology than anything they're working with these days. These days, it's corporations good when they're giving us money. Corporations bad when they're campaigning against us. Money in politics good when the money's going to us. Money in politics bad now it's going at us. Medical liberty. You can't make me wear a mask. You can't make me get a shot.
It's such
Abortion.
it's like special pleading in every different direction. Like they want to carve out this very this like little sphere that never actually, of like a society that never actually existed.
Yes, yes. Like things never touch, and you point out, oh, are you trying to say wearing a mask is just like an abortion? But like, no, like I'm pointing out that I can't draw a thread as to where government ends when it comes to medical say so. Uh,
Yeah.
no, that's what's very frustrating, and because of that, this
That's
is what makes him so dangerous. Yeah, because of that, this is what makes him so dangerous, in my opinion. It makes him dangerous because I do think they will go like this Supreme Court. Amy Coney Barrett is not Sandra Day O'Connor. Stephen Kavanaugh is not Stephen Breyer or David Souter. These guys are dyed in the wool ideologues who are there to do it, want to do it. Just need Gorsuch and John Roberts, one of those two, to go along with the party here. And if they can get that, then they're off to the races. And I don't think they've thought, like, I don't think Amy Coney Barrett has done a lot of serious thinking on a lot of things, to be completely honest. She doesn't have a thick resume. I don't think she's remotely thought about what the impact on society would be if she actually got what she wanted. Like, it's absolute dog that caught the parked car, but this dog is stupid enough that I still expect them to chase the parked car and like bite into the bumper first before they realize they have a problem on their hands.
They're like, yeah, they're arming the missile before they parachute out of the airplane. Like if they do ever actually go through with this, I can't imagine them staying on the court. Like, they're young, they can go off and make $100 million working for some law firm after being a Supreme Court guy. Like,
Oh yeah,
just the clout of having done that is worth whatever to these big firms. Like,
Kavanaugh.
that's the worst part, is that they can like their reputation. Like, what's their reputation cost? Because I'm willing to bet there's enough firms that would still employ them after they did it.
I mean, I'm seriously thinking. I can't think of a
Who's gonna
single.
become
This is not
chair
Lynn
of the
Wood. This
FedSat?
is not
Like,
Sidney Powell and Lynn Wood. Like, if Kavanaugh and Coney Barrett leave, like, yeah, Coney Barrett's a lightweight. She'll at that point have been a Supreme Court justice.
yeah.
Like, yeah, I mean, you can go. She's a
Whatever-
light. You can
whatever
say she never
firm-
should have been there, but she will have been there at that point.
Whatever firm hires her will get two competent like Yale graduates to like actually do her work for her and just make the money off of her name.
And it will say Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett every time she signs any document at that firm.
Exactly.
That signature alone is probably worth six figures. Just real talk. So, like, no, there's no downside for a person like her, which is one of the biggest kind of problems here with this. No, I'm worried. I really am. And I'm worried because, like, Biden continues to go on autopilot with the Supreme Court. He doesn't. There are things that, I was talking about before the show. He's pleasantly surprised us on the court, and his dalliance on this has not been a surprise. But there is certainly a wing of the Democratic Party that I don't think really appreciates how much of a problem this Supreme Court issue is. And I also think, in fairness, a lot of the left, like the activist left and stuff, don't appreciate how big of a problem this Supreme Court thing is and how quickly.
Both Obamacare and gay marriage were both upheld by the Supreme Court. Like,
Yeah.
any M4A, like Medicare for all that I would want, like
Anything. Yeah.
free college, like anything that would feed all of those varying intersectional programs is all going to come up to a Supreme Court challenge, and not looking good for these nine.
No. And in that sense, it behooves the blue coalition, broadly speaking, to like, and really, like, to this point, where the left can step in is start yelling at the Democrats about the Supreme Court a shitload. Because to your point, nothing we're gonna want to really see get passed is gonna survive. Like we could hashtag force the vote. And if we and even if we force the vote and magic happened and like Ted Cruz was like, I support M4A. If we
Yeah,
have to pass this thing, Mitch. Magic happens. Uh
yeah,
Even then we get to the Supreme Court and like, Kavanaugh's like, I can't wait to strike this down. I hate poor people. Yeah, no, like that's the issue. So no, Biden does need to do something on this. Or else, yeah, it's going to be a real problem. I'm hopeful about that. I don't know what's going to happen, but I do like that bill that talks about expanding the court to 13 to reflect the number of circuit courts in the country. Um, I think if Pelosi could get her brain around supporting that and actually bringing it out to the floor and whipping some votes for it, I think that would be a good thing.
yeah.
All right, that'll do it for this episode of Don't Worry About the Government. Hopefully, you all enjoyed this one. We'll do more AV clubs along the way. If you were listening to this show and you're like, I'd like to do an AV club, you can. You could do an AV club. Go and support the show over at patreon.com/DWATG. Sub up, support the show. The Bucka Show is all we're asking for that. Shoot me a message and let me know if you want to do the AV club. That's it. I'm making the AV club and a show that patrons can come on. Boom. I just came on new policies. Yeah, I know, dynamism, responsive government. So yeah, if you're a patron, you want to come on, do an AV club, I'll let people know when we're doing the next one, like this show prior. I'll get you into a group chat. We'll shoot you the link. Do it just like this. Bucka Show is all we're asking. iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify is where you can find the show. We're also on YouTube. I just removed from the behind the archives wall a whole bunch of old video episodes. If you've ever wanted to see a video version of the show before you go and support the show, go and check out Don't Worry About the Government on YouTube. You can go and see old video clips like a month old and older on there. You want to see what I look like? If you don't want to see what I look like, keep it a mystery. Cut out a picture of Geraldo. He's a good looking guy. No? Okay, fine. That's going to do it for this episode. Don't Worry About the Government. Until the next one, bye-bye.